Always.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. We are ready to begin.
All right, we will call this meeting of, I can never remember the title of it. Too long. Of the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission Station Facility Development Committee meeting in order. We get a roll call, please.
Thank you. Committee members Chiesa,
I'm here.
you,
Here.
Vice Chair Craig Hensley. Here. Chair Zuber.
Here.
Thank you. We have quorum.
Next item is public comment. Do you have any online?
Seeing none online.
Anyone in the room?
Seeing none.
Hearing none, we'll move on. Item 3 is the consent calendar. One item. Anybody want to pull it for consideration? No, then I would, is there any public comment?
No public comment online.
Anybody in the room? No entertaining motion?
Move to approve.
Second. Roll call, do we need a roll call?
We do.
Roll call.
Thank you. Committee members Chiesa,
Aye.
you,
Aye.
Vice Chair Craig Hensley.
Aye.
Chair Zuber.
Here, or aye.
Thank you.
I'm here too.
Motion passes.
Item 4 has been pulled from the agenda. Are you on the next week?
It'll come out a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
Full by set.
So move down to item 5. And Mr. Lupari has promised that he's going to make this brief and to the point.
7 years ago, Michael started on this item.
So David's going to provide a summary of the Valley Rail North program. What we thought would be helpful for the commission at this juncture, as you know, we've been focusing on the Valley Rail North and execution project delivery on those projects. So David's going to take us through sort of where we are in that process, from project standpoint, from process standpoint, and really kind of just reset to make sure the commission is clear on what the projects, the specific projects are, and what our strategy for delivering the projects is. So we'll walk you through that. You probably have, this is the only item, so it's won't take too long, but you may have a lot of questions because there's a lot of material here. So Christine's here, answer some specific project questions, and then David and I can address any strategy questions or approach questions. So with that, I'll let David walk us through the steps.
Thanks, Chris. So I will say also one of the lenses you may want to consider as you're reviewing the slides as well as some of the communication is the structure of this really is the beginning of the structure for the communication plan, like for the Valley Rail. And so as you see some of the arrangement of the slides and some of the information, you can anticipate that this would be things that like formats that you would see in the future, but also formats that we would be taking to your communities to communicate like updates on these projects. So we're trying to really focus the communication direction on really essential information, but also in a very visual way so that like it's understandable like as we present this. So I would just say that might also be a helpful note just because we're talking through the slides. So just an overview of what we're going to talk about in this presentation. We're going to talk really first about the near-term focus direction that you have provided, that the commission has ratified, like for staff. We're first going to talk about the Gold Runner enhancements, like the sort of the initial projects that are on the Valley Rail delivery schedule, and then we're going to talk about the Valley Rail North update. And then what should you expect next, like after this presentation? I really thought he was going to blow his horn one more time. One of the things you won't notice, like in terms of the agenda, is we're not going to be talking about a Valley Rail South update at this meeting, but staff was working on that update. But staff is working on that. It's like a cartoon. Staff is working on that update for you, but it's important that we really move the Valley Rail North direction forward and then make sure that what we present to you in the South is like complementary to that first step. So that's the work that we're going through right now. So just as a reminder, back in January, you provided staff direction related to prioritizing or concentrating delivery in the north, and then in the south, making sure that we're focused on the grants and fully funding that segment. In between that meeting and the March meetings, we did a series of briefings for CalSTA and Caltrans on the funding side, for Union Pacific, like on the agreement and like the project side. And then we began the stakeholder outreach in the South to sort of like get them prepared for what changes they were going to see in delivery. All of that recommendation was then brought to the commission in March for adoption. They did take action and adopt that direction. The JPA board heard an item related to that as well, so that they're fully informed on the direction from the commission and your recommendation. And then we continue to have kind of these three pillars happening after that. So we're continuing discussions with UP. We're ensuring that CalSTA and Caltrans are aligned with us, like on what needs to happen with the funding to fully fund the northern projects. And then we've continued, as you have heard in the commission meeting, like a series of briefings at Stanislaus, including Chris attending StanCom's policy board. From a near-term progress perspective, we want to show you, well, what can you expect in terms of Valley Rail in the next few years? So you can see sort of like before this, we completed the box culvert, we purchased the rail cars. One of the key items toward meeting the emissions goals of the TIRSIP application actually was implementing renewable diesel on the fleet for both services. That has also been completed, a huge step like in that direction. In 2026, what you'll see is a series of projects completing design, a few projects that will be starting construction, and then one project that will actually complete construction. And so a lot of progress will happen in this year. And next year, you see that momentum continuing, where a few more projects starting construction, bids going out for another set of projects, and then a few projects completing construction, so that you start to see sort of the milestones that are going to be coming in play as we really move your direction forward. And that kind of drumbeat that Valley Rail is moving forward, and then all of the groundbreakings and the ribbon cuttings that really project progress, like will be happening. The near-term projects that we'll talk about next in terms of the Gold Runner enhancements will actually be things that will be open to passengers like very quickly, and enhancements that will go into operations in the short order. So to talk about, well, what is there an expectation that you will see first from Valley Rail? Really, that starts with the Gold Runner enhancement. So included in your sort of in the commission and JPA submission for TIRSIP were two stations for the current Gold Runner service. One is the Oakley station. You see it there, sort of like just west of Stockton, and then a relocated Madera station, sort of more down in the valley. And really the goal of those projects was to provide enhancements to the Gold Runner service, as well as particularly for the Madera project, as well as the Lake to Escalon project that you see on the map. Like those are projects that are also aimed at the Gold Runner's integration and coordination with the high-speed rail service. So those are key projects for Gold Runner, key projects for the state of California, and the goals that we have there. So if you go to this next slide, what you'll see is this format related to, well, what are these projects? And so I'll run through just a few of the particulars, and feel free to stop, ask questions if needed. But these would be sort of a format for kind of a project overview that you'll see, even as we might bring forward to you amendments or contracts related to these projects. This will be like the first slide that you see that would help orient both you and the public to the project. So you can see here, starting with the Oakley station in Contra Costa County, you see here like a little blow up of where it is in the world, right there, sort of between on the Gold Runner service, the Stockton San Joaquin Street station and the Martinez station. It's off of Main Street in Oakley, California. This is a primarily like a passenger platform project that is being constructed. There is a parking lot that is adjacent to this project, but that project for the parking lot actually was constructed by the city of Oakley and it's already completed. The purpose of this project is to provide better access to eastern Contra Costa County. And right now it's in the revisions to bid plan phase. Right now, the intention is that they would go out to bid this summer, late summer. It would start construction in the winter of this year, early next year, and open to passengers in the fall of 2027. For the Madera station, you can see sort of a graphic of it here. It is off Avenue 12 in Madera, California. This is like sort of like the southern part of Madera County. Really great access to 99. This is why the location was chosen, as well as it's co-located where the BNSF corridor is actually very close to the high-speed rail corridor. So most of the project is actually being constructed on high-speed rail land, with a small portion being constructed on BNSF right away. In the future, the intention is that this would be the connection point between Gold Runner and high-speed rail service. We're in close coordination with them, not only on our relocated station project, but also on their project at this site, which is in a different phase than what you see here in terms of the project schedule. And then the improvements that we're building in terms of parking lots and other things, those would be a shared use and then eventually turned over to the authority at some point. Looking at getting to bid in the summer, very similar schedule to Oakley, and then opening up to passengers in summer of 27. The Lake to Escalon project, maybe, this is an important project. It's a siting, so maybe not as exciting as the station, but you can see sort of where it is. It's actually in San Joaquin County, north of the Modesto station on the BNSF rail line. This is SJJPA's commitment to BNSF for the 8th round trip on the Gold Runner service. So as we look to add future capacity and add future trains for Gold Runner, this is an essential project. It's in construction right now, set to be completed in summer of this year. This is not the only project that's needed for the 8th round trip, but this is our contribution to that. There are some projects that Caltrans is responsible for that need to be completed before the 8th round trip can operate in this part of the corridor. Before we move to sort of the Valley Rail North segment, any questions or yep?
The ridership, if we have an 8th round trip, then we are, notwithstanding we have a platform, if it's facilitating that, then we are actually, I assume, creating additional ridership.
Yes. So when we bring forward to you the operating plan for the 8th round trip, you can sort of like put those benefits onto this project. But right now that is still in the planning phase in terms of when that train will operate and what the forecasted ridership would be. But we can certainly add a note relating to that to those things on project. Any other questions for everyone? Okay, so when you sort of hear some of those dates, you can begin to see like what will be some of the immediate progress on Valley Rail, particularly on the Gold Runner service, and how passengers actually will experience the investment from Valley Rail in a very like near term horizon. So when we begin to look at Valley Rail North, the focus that Chris provided in terms of direction and vision really is that we're looking to launch what would be meaningful passenger service that maximizes the ridership opportunity of all of the projects that we have in the Valley Rail program to markets that have demand now. And really when you think of, well, how do you then assess what projects move forward, ensuring that what we're producing in and constructing in Valley Rail North really are foundational elements. So as I mentioned before, when I talk about Valley Rail South, what we build in the north will be utilized by whatever service operates in the south, right? Those southern trains need a place, like a destination market to go to. It's not really going to be Stockton, right? It needs to be Sacramento or some larger market. And so these foundational elements are essential for the entire Valley Rail vision to be realized. And these also advance the funding goals. So as we actually do have a slide later in the presentation that talks about, well, how much of the goals are we going to get to in terms of VMT reduction, GHG reduction, right? This is like getting us on that path. We're leveraging primarily state funding for what you're going to see in the next several slides, because that means we can move quicker than federal funding. And then we're really trying to minimize all of the risk as much as possible for these projects. And that's a key, that we can't eliminate risk, but we're minimizing risk where possible. When you look at sort of some of the outcomes related to this particular part of the service plan, we're forecasted just under, and maybe we can find 100 riders out there, maybe like a school group or something, to bump this up to 570,000 growth in ridership from this initial train that will operate in the corridor. You can sort of see the station utilization in the new stations in the north, like how busy those stations will be, like when the service opens in 2031. And then there on the bottom portion, in terms of 13 million vehicle miles traveled reduction, over 2 million GHG reduction. Those are the markers that we then have to communicate to the state to say, these were in our TIRCIP plan. We are making reasonable progress toward meeting those goals. And then every time Valley Rail launches a new train, that will be another marker on reaching those goals. In terms of funding for this project, we can see here all of those projects that you saw on the previous slide. They're with working with CALSA and CTC, the lion's share of these projects will be fully funded. We do have one funding gap at this point, and that is in the current ACE trunk line service area down in near sort of the Fremont station, which is the Newark Albury siding, which is a required project for the 5th ACE round trip to operate in that corridor. It's been a long-standing requirement. We're working on this with UP for some time. Right now, it's underfunded about $28 million. This is the project that we have submitted, and we're working with the state to submit a TIRCIP application for this project. It was not in the original TIRCIP application, so we cannot move the funds that we have on the books today to that project. So we need an injection of new funding to fund that project. So now we'll walk through the projects that were on the Valley Rail North map. So we're going to go north to south. So the Natomas Station layover is off Elkhorn Boulevard on Blacktop Road in Natomas. It is both a construction of a station that has a parking lot as well as a side-loaded platform with canopies. There's a kiss and ride in the bus turnaround at this station as well. Really important though for Natomas is that this is the layover station for the trains that will be in the north. So it has space for 4 trains to lay over there in the future. And this also doesn't just provide access to the service in northern, sort of Sacramento region, but also will provide a future connection for the airport as we ramp up service here, and with more trains that will be running shuttle service to and from the airport, but probably not until we have more frequency at that station. You can see here we're looking to sort of get into the bid phase in the fall of 27 and looking to open this project for passengers, or it'll be completed in 2031, but there are other projects that need to be completed before a train can operate, but more likely in 2031. No.
Question is, so the parking area there, it's interesting about the trip to the airport, because I could see people that might have a 1-day trip or 2-day trip that they leave their car there.
Yeah.
So, or they might end up getting an Uber there and then they take it, wherever.
Yes.
But are we thinking about that, accommodating additional parking for those who may take advantage of access to the airport?
That's not in our current operational plan. We do prefer to restrict access to our parking lots to our transit users, both from like a access perspective, but also from just like a liability perspective. And the entrances to this parking lot like do have like little like arms that come down. I thought people doing that, so but that's something that we can explore in the future.
I'm just thinking about how people.
Yeah.
Prefer to park.
Yeah.
So anyway, just,
Something we can definitely consider in the operational plan, especially as we like assess, well, how full is the parking lot? Do we want to open that for like an ancillary revenue stream that we might want to consider?
And David made this point, which is important to flag this, is that status service for this initial connection to the Thomas, probably will be the greatest for airport service. So it's really those out years, those future service levels where that becomes viable. Initially, this is going to serve more as commuter access or trip access, starting in the morning, heading to San Jose. So not exactly ideal for airport travel.
Then you're sort of traveling, continuing on the tracks south, we come to a track project. It's a Del Paso siding project. It's near Del Paso Road and Arcade Creek, like in Sacramento. This is upgrading some existing track, adding some additional siding as well as main track as well. This is one of the projects that's on the docket for passenger service being sort of initialized in this corridor. So there's a few projects, there's two projects that are distinct rail projects that we'll talk about today. And then also there are track work associated with some of the station projects that get us that capacity that UP needs for us to start service. This is in the PS&E phase, and we're looking sort of winter of this year, next year to start the bid phase, looking to go into construction next summer, and then completed in the winter of 28-29. The Midtown station, right in the heart of Midtown, it's on the corner, sort of like of 19th and Q Street in Midtown Sacramento. It's really near the ice blocks, like if you've been to the ice blocks. It's a new station with a 565-foot platform, as well as sort of more. There are different canopies than what you'll see at the other stations. So sort of there was some additional budget on this project to produce sort of like some custom features that fit into the neighborhood. And then there's also a plaza space that you can sort of see there in the top left picture underneath the RT over a sort of like grade separation that goes over this area where that space can be activated for passengers waiting for trains and the like. This is sort of the most near term of the Valley Rail North projects in terms of like a station that would go into construction. It's going into the bid phase in the fall, looking to be in construction winter of this year, next year, and then be completed in the fall of 28. The Elk Grove station, it's off of Dwight. It's sort of Dwight and Laguna in Elk Grove. You can see sort of a nice rendering of that station here. It's a center loaded platform, so this is where you start to see the implementation of what we have been discussing with you in terms of increased costs, like in the program. You sort of have this like large structure that goes up and over like mainline track, and actually in Elk Grove actually goes over like a sort of like a canal or like a ditch that's in that area that actually makes the span a little bit longer than what is at some other stations. In addition to this, where there is a parking lot, there is like coordination with RT for a bus stop, like at this station. There's also 8,700 feet of new track associated with this. So this would be an area where if you might look at maybe some of the project costs, well, it seems like a lot for a station. Well, it's not just the station, it's also the track work associated with that area of the corridor. The station is looking to go into the bid phase in summer of next year. Construction spring of 28, and then looking to be completed around summer of 2030.
And I'll just add on this one, and Christine will appreciate this notice. This is a super complex station build because of the span of that bridge and just what we're having to do to stage this project. So this will be one, as we go forward, we're having lots of conversations about. This is going to be a tough one.
And then another siding project, sort of like traveling south. is the Phillips sighting. So it's near Point Pleasant Road in Sacramento County. It's about like a 1.25, a little over 1.25 miles of new siding that will go into place and start upgrading some of the grade crossings in this area. This is another one where kind of coupled with Del Paso, the distinct track projects that are required to start passenger service in the corridor. We'll note, like on the schedule, that like right now UP is requiring that we cannot start Phillips until the track work associated with Elk Grove is completed. So even though we're, largely completed with design, we can't actually go to construction until like those projects kind of like come together. It has to do with this area of the corridor and tying those two projects together, working with UP like on a series of maybe like pre-work that we could do. So that's something that we're considering. But right now, this would go into the bid phase in fall of 29, construction spring of 30, and then this would be the last project completed in spring 2031. And then the Newark Albury sighting. So this is the project I mentioned before. This is in the current ACE sort of like trunk line area down like in Alameda County in sort of like a wetland area. And it's an improvement and expansion of 2 miles of track with a new bridge over a channel that's controlled by the Alameda Flood Control District. And this is the sort of a gating project for the 5th ACE round trip. It is in the schedule right now to go to the bid phase in fall of 27, so fall of next year, construction in the winter 27-28, and then completed about a year or so later in the winter of 29-30. This is the one project where we are still seeking some additional funding, as well as some coordination with the Flood Control District and UP, like on the bridge structure that's associated with this project.
Okay, and I'll jump in here as well. When we presented last month, we talked about our criteria and how we were looking at these projects, and then also be really clear-eyed about project risks. And when we look at the schedule and our target of starting service and service we've described in this presentation, this project here presents perhaps the greatest level of risk. And there's 2 reasons. One, the funding that David noted is the first piece. All other projects too are proposed reallocation of the CRCP funding. We have a clear path on funding. This one, we do have to go find additional funding. The Rail Commission in its meeting this morning approved the TRCP application for that funding. We think this project completes really well, so we're hopeful that either this cycle or the next cycle will get that funding, and so I think that's a surmountable amount of funding to get. The other note that I would make on this project is there is the permitting challenge on this project, as David noted, it goes through wetlands, and so I always get concerned when we have a piece of the project that we don't control, and permits is one of the pieces, particularly because in this case, it requires a little bit of effort on UP's part to solve the issue that we're trying to solve. And so we have a good path and we think we can get there. We're also working with UP on some alternatives if we can't clear the permitting process. We'll talk about this one more in the future too, but if you were to say to me, where do you see the biggest vulnerability in meeting the timelines that we've talked about here? This would be the project that I've flagged for you.
EIR has been completed on that, so that's where we kind of know what our risk is.
So then when you sort of like take all of what I just shared kind of like as a whole, this is what that schedule looks like from, as so you see a lot of like, orange sort of on the left side of the screen, and then the orange goes away, right? We get through to design, then you start seeing blues coming in as we're getting into the bid phase. And then primarily there, sort of like in the right-hand side of this milestone schedule, you see mostly dark blue and green, right? Like we're moving into construction, we're moving into the completion of this program, this part of the program. And really, we sort of look at like getting initial revenue service started in 2031. This is what those milestones will look like. This is a graphic that we plan to bring continually back to you to say this is how we're doing on project, and this is sort of the drumbeat that we're creating across the capital delivery schedule, the column schedule to say, well, this is what it's going to look like, and this is how you will then should be have an expectation to see progress as well as to participate in that progress as these projects go into construction and then get completed. And then from a next steps perspective, just want to highlight a few things that are really important for what's going to happen in the immediate term. One is on the capital and operational funding work stream. We, as I mentioned, are working with CalSTA on the realignment of the TIRSIP funds to fully fund Valley Royal North, as you saw on the previous slide. Those conversations have been going really well, and now it's more like the administrative steps to get us there, which is really positive. On the host railroad side, we're continuing those discussions with UP and making sure that we're all clear, like, right, the projects you saw here, like we've been sending them lists of projects, they've been sending us their list of projects, and we're making sure like there's no misunderstandings. And then on the comms plan, the team is very much engaged. You sort of saw the beginning of that here, right? The team has been working on assembling like information like this, and then further information for all of our other channels like the website and like handouts that we can utilize like in briefings in your communities. And our intention is not that we're going to wait till June, but we're going to start that work. But then in June, you'll see sort of a full presentation of that communications plan, like for Valley Rail, like from the team to give you like a robust understanding of what that's going to look like, not just in this phase, but kind of all phases like of that delivery schedule. And with that,
Sure. David, so I really appreciate that milestone slide.
Yeah.
Start to present the sequencing.
Yep.
So we can see how this, as you said, the drumbeat is going along. I have an assumption about the Natomas layover, that's critical to operations.
absolutely.
Am I correct by
Yes.
that? And so how is it the one piece that we need in order to make everything else work, is the last thing on this list?
I think it's more a function of like where it is in design at this point, and then when we anticipate completing design and going into construction. It also has a much long, like it has a fairly long construction duration, like compared to maybe like a smaller station like Midtown, but it's finishing here in 2031, like ahead of like what we anticipate to be like initial service in 2031.
So let me put a little finer point on my question.
Yeah.
Are we anticipating that the Midtown station is gonna be completed and sit mothballed for 3 years while Natomas is being constructed?
We do anticipate that Midtown will be completed, and then we're like working on like an operational, like sort of like contingency, or not a contingency, an operational plan that will like retain those assets in a state of good repair, like while we're waiting to operate service.
But it'll be sitting there without any trains running to it.
It'll be sitting without any trains, but we're in close coordination with the Midtown Association and maybe like other like uses like for the plaza space that could activate that space like when there's not trains there.
And so given that there is funding, is there bandwidth? If we were to reprioritize, could we push all in on Natomas or on Elk Grove, given that Elk Grove, Phillips is contingent on Elk Grove? I think you see where I'm going with this. Is there a way to accelerate and focus on the highest priority projects that other projects can rely upon rather than putting out a project and completing it and then having it sit and we're just maintaining it?
Yeah, we can reevaluate the project delivery schedule. I will say that one of the challenges for trying to operationalize the corridor maybe ahead of this schedule is that the requirement from UP is that all of these are completed. And so you might move some of the milestones into different parts of the schedule, but you really got to wait for them all to be completed. Maybe like one of the other things that we consider is just like not releasing Midtown like until a later time, like in the delivery schedule. But one of the things that doesn't provide is the opportunity to show that we're moving forward. But we can reevaluate that and bring a more.
And I appreciate that sort of because I've also pounded that drum, right? Like we're not getting anything done, but it seems to me to be a little bit odd to have the day that the train shows up at the station's already 3 years long.
Yeah, understood.
And we're very attuned to the issue you put your finger on. There's a complex, delivery path here that we're trying to work. So we don't want to risk pushing something else down the line and causing the delay in the overall outcome. And so part of the dimension is part of what we're looking to do is so that it doesn't sit mothballed at that time. As you know, that the space is activated and used, by the local community, and it's not something that, gets long in the tooth, as you said, but it's used in that time frame. Recognizing that it could be that very time of program that we just saw.
Do we have bandwidth or throughput constraints of how many balls we have in the air at one time? Is there an issue where we cannot manage all of these projects concurrently and we have to sequence them? Or can we put out to the contractors to get the work done?
I think it's less that issue than it is more just the way the projects are coming online and the requirements of the West Railroad and those types of things. Do we have bandwidth issues? This is a lot of projects to work through as agency in over 5 years, so we're gonna be very attuned to what you just said. But that's not impacting what we're this time frame here, that's not.
Okay, final question. Could we bifurcate the Natomas project to get the layover infrastructure in the ground so it can hold trains maybe in advance of having the full parking lot station and everything else? In other words, if these things are contingent, we have to have X in place before Y can happen. Can we push all in on X?
So that is something we're looking at, both from a project timing standpoint, but also value engineering time. Standpoint, if we, find some money out of the program. So that's something we've looked at, I think it's possible, but we're right now,
Sorry, I didn't hear the last phrase.
right now, this is sort of our, as we identify the best execution, given the current but as along my career, I was in a startup, we always talk about pivots. Yeah, so what you just described is one of the pivots we're looking at if we need to.
Good. And I just think it's prudent because as we look at all these things as building blocks, get the foundational building blocks prioritized. Yeah, I've said my piece. Yeah, kind of thing.
All we want to say, thank you. Anybody else?
Just back to the communications and rolling this out, because I think to Pat's point, I think it's a nice way to graphically demonstrate where we are with our valley, and it's promising, and then it says funded, if you'd like to see funded. I'm wondering if at what point, for example, we feel comfortable seeing this presented to the board of supervisors. I mean, to me, I want to see this going to not just the COGS, but the board of supervisors up here first before it gets down to any of the communities, because I think that matters. And this, your point, looks great until you realize you may not have that Midtown station open. So, are we at a point where we need to get this information out for supervisors as a presentation, or do we wait until we feel, the question, we got a station that can open,
Right.
or we asked her that, say it's a further progress, we're trying to figure out the time. So, because this is a big thing with me, it's like, we need to get this information out to the decision makers so that they can see we are progressing and moving forward. In those counties and communities that were impacted and benefited from. So that's kind of part of the communications plan schedule. What is it you want to present?
And I guess this goes back to the point that I was just making is for my colleagues and for the folks in the cities up in the Sacramento County area, Sacramento particularly, they want to see the green check marker when the trains run,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's that is like our focus, right? Like, when can we get a train operating in Portland? Like, that's, to your point, like, completing a project, like, isn't what we do, right? What we do is run trains, right? And we're focused on that.
David and this guy said to me, say that very point, which is construction complete isn't our end line. Our finish line is the trains operating, and that's what we're focused on. So that's where will be our orientation. And then just another comment about the communications plan, as David noted, we'll come present that to you in June, so you see the full scope. Understanding that it's happening, started January, and it's happening as fast as we're going. That is, in our view, super critical not just for a victory lap and, claiming success, but also, we're gonna have, continuing funding needs in the South. Right, so part of that strategy is to show success, so those, funding efforts in the South can be successful. We're gonna say, look, this is happening. The other piece of that is, we're gonna have, continuing funding needs when it comes to operations. And so showing these projects what they mean and that they're happening is gonna be really, really important. And so the communications piece that you mentioned is a critical part of this whole program, so, when we presented last meeting, we talked about the work streams, so that work stream is at the top of the list with the other work streams, because not only for building recognition about what the program does and what we're delivering, but also making sure we secure the funding to complete the rest of the program and the operating trains once so.
Yeah, and to that point, what I'm thinking is, it's almost like you need to add one more, star operational service period, whatever it is, so. That way people can see, because that is then the additional cost of starting with service. And I think a service start date would be important to communicate, even though we know it's anticipated service start date, because you never know it's gonna happen. But at least that is wrapped all up, so.
And to Lisa's point, for me to manage expectations on my colleagues, that's the date I need to feel pretty comfortable about. By this milestone schedule, are we looking at trains running in 2030 or 2031 at the earliest?
31.
31 at the earliest.
Yeah, because Phillips does need to be completed.
Okay.
Yeah, and then, we'll talk about this as we, in the times ahead, but we'll continue to talk about our progress is towards that. I want to be very transparent about the risks of us making that, and then also we're not gonna we hit a bump in the road and stop. We're gonna figure out, okay, we expect this certain thing to happen. It's not happening the way we thought it would happen. So now what's the play? How do we still get the service? So that if we run into challenges, which we will. This is a complex program, so there will be challenges along the way. But we're always going to figure out, okay, how do we pivot and where do we go next, and still try to get to service at that time.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you, sir. Nice job. Yeah, we'll still hear.
That's all right, I think it was a little bit longer than 10 minutes.
All right, next item, committee member comments, anything? Nothing, okay? Then we come to adjournment, the May meeting, there will be no May meeting, so our next meeting will be on June 5th at 10:30 a.m. Thank you all for attending. I'm done.
Happy Easter, everyone.
It's gonna be all like that.